Hey everyone, welcome to Grit Machine DNA. Today I am with Miguel Martinez. I call him Miguelito. We're going to talk about that later. But it is wonderful to be with him today and to have you guys with us along for this journey. So, Miguelito, let's get started. Welcome to Grit Machine DNA podcast.
Thank you for having me, David. My name is Miguel Martinez, Miguelito, as David calls me. Born and raised Boston, Massachusetts, and it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so thank you for being here, man. Let's dive right in. Let's start with what's your full name?
Miguel Ivan Martinez.
Miguel Ivan Martinez. Awesome. Well, Miguel, I thought about having you on the podcast, as you know, because I like to talk with people who are doing remarkable things or have come from challenging circumstances to do wonderful things and inspire others. And Miguel is one of those people. So, Miguelito, I want to start with some background for folks. I always start with this question for everyone. Who are you?
A young man born and raised in Boston, raised in the South End. Come from a Puerto Rican family. My grandparents, born in Puerto Rico, brought here at a young age to work and build a better future for all of us. And I'm a musician. I'm a person who loves people and wants to bring the best out of people.
That's an awesome answer. Miguel is from the South End of Boston. Why don't you describe that for people who may not live in Boston or Massachusetts? What is the South End of Boston? Describe that for us.
So the South End of Boston, for me, I remember at a young age just showing up to this place where there was so many Puerto Ricans. It was a place where those who were born in the island went and just try to build a life there. And I remember growing up, there was so much culture, and it was almost the closest thing I could get to Puerto Rico and to my background, to my family's background.
So the South End of Boston is what streets?
You have San Juan Street, you have Aguadilla Street. This all Tremont is there as well.
West Dedham.
West Dedham. Yeah, you know, those names though, like, you know, the Aguadilla and San Juan, I think it was very interesting that they had those names.
Why is it interesting?
Because Aguadilla it's a town in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
San Juan is also a part of Puerto Rico. So those names, you know, growing up in Boston, being born in the city, hearing those names all the time will make you want to know why they were called that.
Yeah.
You know, and that would always bring me back to where I'm from, you know, where my family's from. It kept it alive in me.
That's cool. So, all right, so where's your family from?
So start off with my grandparents. My grandmother is from Morovis and Ciales, Puerto Rico. My grandfather's from Ponce, Puerto Rico. And my parents were born in Boston. But my grandparents from my Morovis and Ciales and Ponce are from my mother's side. Mm-hmm. From my father's side, my grandfather's from Cuamo and my grandmother's from Mayagüez.
Awesome. So it's interesting for those of you who might know the island of Puerto Rico, a very diverse group of areas, right? You have the middle of the island, you have the south Ponce, you have the west Mayagüez. So pretty distinct areas. Interesting. So your grandparents came to the United States from Puerto Rico. Your parents were born here. What are your earliest we're going to get to Miguelito is an incredible musician. He's a percussionist. We're going to get to that in a bit, but I want to sort of give some background before we go there. What were your earliest memories like? You talk a lot about Puerto Rico, your ethnic background, etc. What were your earliest memories like as a kid?
My earliest memories, man. You know, I constantly give myself the time to think of those things. I remember just being about 3-4 years old and always, you know, my parents were young. So my mom was 20 years old when she had me. And my dad was in his 20s as well. So they lived with my grandparents. So I was around my grandparents all the time, and I remember waking up and my grandmother having traditional music in the house, full blast, playing the LPs.
Yeah.
And my grandfather loved salsa, so he would have the salsas as well. Yeah. And I just remember growing up in a traditional Puerto Rican home. You know, you wake up, you smell the food, the music, the conversations in Spanish. Mm-hmm. And I remember, you know, I'm the first grandchild, so for me, I took in so much of that. Yeah. And I could remember just being at that age and being surrounded by so many people of our culture, and it was present. Yeah. So that I remember more than anything the music in my life. Mm-hmm. I remember that very clear. Just it came from that home structure.
Let's describe two different things. Let's describe the food first. What type of food did you grow up with as a young kid?
Man, you know, you have the white rice. Yeah. You have the beans.
Arroz, habichuelas.
Habichuelas. Habichuela amarilla, roja, yellow, red beans. You know, the yellow rice con gandules.
Arroz guisado con gandules.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of meats?
Pork.
Pork.
Yeah, pork.
Okay, pork
was big. I remember vividly my grandfather would always make pulpo. Ensalada de pulpo.
Octopus. Yeah.
Yeah, and then fish.
Yeah, fish.
Huelle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was those
crabs.
Also. Bacalao.
Of course, you can't miss bacalao. Codfish.
Con vianda.
Yeah.
Guineo.
Yeah, bananas, plantains.
My grandmother always taught me, when we would eat that dish, she would always teach me that this is what they ate when they didn't really have to eat.
Yeah, which dish?
The bacalao con vianda.
That's right.
And
so
I learned
typically bacalaos with either like a boiled plantain or boiled ñame, right, or fried ñame.
Guanime.
Guanime también, yep.
Guanime. Yeah. And she taught me how to enjoy that plate, man. And not underestimate the plate.
Yeah, that's right. Well, for context, so bacalao, codfish, with a yam or batata, sweet potato type of breadfruits were the staple. Bacalao was very much available throughout the island regions, especially the coastal regions, and people were and still are very humble. And so codfish, bacalao, was instrumental in the diet of Puerto Ricans for years, still is, especially in the mountain region. And then the viandas, the breadfruits you could dig out of the mountains, ñame, batata, plátano. You could get those things in the mountains and bring that home, or you could buy it very low cost in the market daily, every day, because there was very minimal refrigeration prior to the 1960s. Every day, people went out and bought their food either in the market or dug it out of the mountains and would eat. That was their daily staple. So a little context. How about the music? You talked a lot about music. Music is your passion. What kind of music did you grow up listening to?
I grew up listening to música jíbara.
Yeah, traditional music from Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. And salsa.
Yep, salsa.
Pasillo, which is traditional music as well.
Yep.
Danzas.
Yep.
I know a lot of this I took in from my grandmother from my mother's side.
Yeah.
It was so present.
Yeah.
It was present. Parrandas.
Yeah.
You have all the trullas and the aguinaldos.
All right, so let's pause there. Danzas are the only modern form of classical music in the New World, right? A lot of classical music was developed in Europe. Puerto Rican danzas are the only modern form of classical music created in the New World. A lot of people don't know that. But danzas are complex classical type music. Puerto Ricans, of course, put lyrics to them. And the composer Gottschalk dedicated several songs in the mid 1800s. He was a classical composer to the island of Puerto Rico. I think his name is Louis Marie Gasha, and he has several compositions of classical music based on the danza and the seis jíbaro, seis andino. So that's just a piece there. And then parrandas, trullas, aguinaldos, and décimas are very much Puerto Rican music that some people say are played during Christmas time, but from people like Miguelito and I, we play that all year round. That was the music of the folk people who lived in the mountains that would listen to that music when they were going to work at 4 or 5 in the morning, or they would sing it, improvising songs as they walked. So you grew up listening to this music. What was it like? What did you listen to? Who were the singers?
Man, at that age, the two singers that were present and that I was introduced to was Ramito and Luis Miranda.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those two, they had my grandparents had LPs of them, and
you better explain what LPs are, because there might be some young folks listening who don't know what an LP is.
It's a vinyl. It's a vinyl form of a CD.
I love that.
And my grandparents would play it with a needle, and needle would cause, when it would go in circles, the contact of the needle and the vinyl would cause sound. And I grew up seeing that at home, and that music for me, immediately I fell in love. I fell in love with the music, especially that kind of music. I felt like it was my connection, my direct connection to the island where my grandparents were born, and I grew a passion for it at a very young age. And all the musicians from the town that I grew up, I pull their coats all the time and want to be involved in everything they were doing musically. And my grandmother caught on to that, and she supported me. She supported my family, supported me. But my grandmother, when she saw that, she took it. She said, in other words, she grabbed me and she pushed me towards that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I owe it all to her.
I love that. So your grandmother, I want to touch on base about her a little bit. You said you grew up, your parents lived with your grandparents when you were a little kid. I know your parents, they're incredible people, but I want to first ask about your grandmother. Your grandparents seem to have had a lot of influence on you. What was the importance of your grandparents' role for you as a child?
I think that because my parents were young, my grandparents were that support for them, and they taught me values, the values that my parents maybe at the moment couldn't teach me. And I think that my grandparents, because my parents were young and because maybe their mind wasn't in the correct place, my grandparents, especially my grandmother, saw something in me, and immediately couldn't let that go to waste.
Yeah.
And I remember so much. I mean, my grandparents would take me food shopping with them. Almost everything they did, I was with them, and my dad always tells me that sometimes he would get in at a certain time to the house and he wanted to pick me up as a baby, and he would ask my mom, "Where's Gelito? Where's the baby?" He's with his grandparents. And I guess because I was the first grandchild, my grandparents, for them that was, they wanted me all the time.
That's funny. Well, it speaks to the importance of having people who love you, right? Family that loves you around you. How about your parents? Talk a little bit about your parents. Two incredible human beings. What was that like growing up? What values did your grandparents and your parents teach you growing up?
So, one thing that I still take to this day, and I would keep it with me and teach my children one day. My father always taught me to respect my elders. When I walk into the room, always introduce myself, be respectful, one thing that was very important was not to get in into adult conversations when you were at that age, and that's something that I take serious. I take serious, and wherever I go, at a very young age, and even till this day, I can walk into a place and see someone who when I was little was older than me, and now they're much older than me. They recognize me, I recognize them, I say hello with respect. But that's because my father taught me that.
Yeah.
My father taught me that, and I didn't grow up in an easy home. My parents, two young people. My dad's life growing up was very different from my mother's life growing up, and there were certain things, certain habits that weren't the best.
Yeah.
My dad loved gambling at one point in his life. He was what we call a hustler, someone that felt like he had to be out in the street working all the time. His family owned used car business, and he felt he needed to be there all the time to provide for his family. And that was good, and there was a bad side to it, because there's time for everything. And I feel because he felt the need to be out there, out working all the time, there were certain things that now we can talk about it, he would miss out on. And I don't blame him. It was his way of trying to provide for us. And my mom was a great mother, and she did everything she can to make sure we were fine as well. And she dealt with my father for a very long time. And now I can say they're two different people, better people, better parents.
Wow.
And now we can look back at that and say, there were things, they were ignorant, they were young. There were things that they know now that they didn't know before. And that's when I can go back and think of my grandparents and say, if they didn't have my grandparents, there's things that today they probably would have still been lacked.
Yeah. I love, Miguelito, how you're able to look back and have the maturity and the understanding and the love to put that all in perspective. I find that I've said this in previous podcasts with some of my prior guests, that one of the main issues in today's society in America is men missing from the home, right? Which leads to broken homes many times. And so I love the fact that you and your father, are still very close. He is an incredible human being. And that you now, as an adult who's recently married, can put all that in perspective and say, yeah, there was good and bad. We moved beyond that. And there's still love. You guys are still connected. What advice would you give to aspiring fathers or young fathers today, just having the perspective you have today?
The advice that I can give is to continue to strive for what you love. Don't give up. I know it can be hard at times, but if you love something, you fight for what you love, and you try your best to do what you can. Because if you don't do it for yourself, no one will. No one will. And my dad had a choice. My dad had a choice, and this is why I honor my father. I love my father. I respect my father. It's because he had a choice. He had two choices: continue that life, or change his life for better. I don't ever think it's too late. I think you have a chance every day to become better, and my father chose to become better. And this is why I respect and honor my father. And I can talk about this and talk about the things that at one point bothered and hurt me. And I can look at my dad and forgive him, forgive my mom, because they're both not perfect. But I can do that because there was a choice, and they chose. And I also think that having Christ in our heart has allowed us to forgive faster, and be able to forgive and not look back at it and come back to that feeling that we once had. I think that because we have Christ in our hearts, we're able to love each other despite all the things we had to go through.
I love that. One of the principles I live by is Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, kindness, right? Joy, love. I love that perspective, Miguelito. Let me come back to music. So, I'm going to ask two questions. What do you do for a living to put money on the table?
So I work at Tufts Medical Center. I do admin work in the cardiology department. I schedule appointments for patients, make sure that their needs are met. I receive phone calls that have to do with medications, and I have to reach out to the nurses and send emails out. So I do that. And I also do my passion, which is music, on the side. And I try not to look at it as a job, but it is a great way as well to bring income to the home. So I do those two things. I've been more than blessed to be able to have a circular job and also be able to do my passion, man.
Yeah. So let's talk about your passion, music. What is your role as a musician? What do you play? What instruments do you play?
So I consider myself a percussionist, multi-percussionist. I play everything from Afro-Cuban instruments, congas, timbales, bongo, a bit of cajon, minor percussion, shakers. My favorite instrument, the guiro.
What's the guiro? I want you to show first and then play it.
So the guiro is a vegetable. This is called marimbo. We call it marimbo.
O higuera.
Yeah. They those who make it, which we call them artesanos, they plant the seed. And it has a certain amount of time in the ground, and it grows like a normal plant. And so the leaf comes out, and once this little white piece comes out, it falls out. That's when this starts to grow. They grow in all kinds of sizes.
Yeah, for those that can't see it, essentially it's a foot-long gourd. Yeah, it's a foot-long gourd, and it's hard and dry.
And so they leave it out. So once the gourd starts to fall out, it's green. It's green at first, and it starts to dry up little by little, and then the guys or the woman who make it, with a knife, they start to carve the green shell around it, and most of the time it's this color or lighter.
Yeah, like a bit dark beige color.
Yeah,
and then it has dozens of tiny lines.
So they carve lines with a knife, and it looks a bit like this.
It's cool.
And we use it with it almost looks like a hairbrush.
Yeah, it looks like a hairbrush.
It's a piece of wood. They make them with different kinds of wood, and they put steel. These are stainless steel. So stainless steel or steel. At one point, there were artesanos. How you say artesanos?
Artisans. Yep.
That would use cuerda de pianos.
Yep.
And there's different kinds now all around the world. There's also the guiro cubano, which is very similar to this, but it has a hole on top, and the lines are more separated, and they're thicker. And in Dominican Republic, and then in Colombia,
What's the Dominican guiro like?
The Dominican guiro, they call it the guira. It's made out of steel, and I know that they use
It's like a hole puncher.
Yeah, it's like they use a screw and they start to hit it with a hammer, and it has a whole bunch of dots, and they use one of these but with thicker varillas, and they use it for merengue, bachata, cumbia, and this such a great instrument for me.
You want to give us a sample?
Sure.
That's awesome, man. So guiro in Puerto Rico, guira in Dominican Republic. Why did you gravitate so much to the guiro?
So I can say that my grandmother's uncle, Paco Figueroa, was the person I saw immediately when I was a kid playing the guiro. And the moment I saw him, I grabbed it. I was very young. I was about maybe 2 or 3 years old.
Wow.
My grandmother had a guiro at home as well, made out of bamboo.
Wow.
Made out of bamboo. And I, when the Christmas season came around, she would take it out.
Yep.
And I saw that. And then she would pass it to me and I would play it. And at that age, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I loved it. They picked up on that. I would leave toys for the instrument. And at at that age, very young, wherever I saw a guiro, I wanted it. And that's where my grandparents and my parents realized this kid loves that instrument.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it became my best friend, man.
That's really cool. How so? How did it become your best friend?
I think the time that I spent with the instrument. There's something about it. There's times where I can't really describe the passion and the love that I have for the instrument, but there's just this connection between myself and the instrument that I don't have with any other.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you, you're also an entrepreneur. You created a gig bag for the guiro, right?
I did.
So talk about that. How did that come about?
So about 3 years ago, I sat down. I remember being at work, and I sat down and put some thought into all the other instruments that I have, and realized that the drums, the congas, the timbales, the bongo, they have cases specifically for those instruments. And I realized that a lot of the guireros that I've met only carry a regular book bag or a suitcase.
Yeah.
And immediately this light came to me, and I thought, how can I create? I'm very creative. Yeah. I'm very creative and have so many visions, and I like to draw. And I thought to myself, I need to create a case where I can protect this instrument, where I can travel with this instrument, and be able to just take care of it. Because a lot of the times, it's happened to me multiple times, where I'll have a guiro in a regular duffel bag and I'll put it in the car and someone would sit. Or I would put it away in a corner and I'd forget it was there.
Yeah.
And the guiro's gone. Because
Yep.
these are very fragile instruments. So I decided to create a bag, and I named the bag Mr. Perk for percussion, because I thought, okay, I can put a guiro here, but you can also put multi-percussion inside the bag. And so it's a regular book bag with a thick cushion. It has dividers in the inside, and you can put, it's about, the bag itself is about 17 inches tall. And it's been a journey.
That's awesome.
Because recently I went to Puerto Rico and I brought the bags with me.
Yeah.
And I realized the need of so many guireros.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what a way to continue to push this instrument and provide for other musicians who have gone through what I've gone through.
Yeah, and you can do it in Puerto Rico, Cuba, y República Dominicana.
All around
you
the
can
world.
do all three.
Yeah,
So,
you fit the guiras fit inside.
Yeah.
So the dividers have Velcro, so you can remove the dividers and put 2 guiras, 1 guira, or you can put a guira and a guiro cubano.
I love that. So you saw a need, you urgently developed a solution for the need. It's classic entrepreneurial. It's awesome. Yeah, nice work, man. So Miguelito, I want to go back a little bit to your family. You were recently married. Yeah. So why don't you talk about that?
So
What's that like?
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I've only been married for a year now. In 2016, I met this beautiful woman by the name of Ruby Rodriguez at the time. Now she's Martinez. And I met her at a church event. It was I was invited to play at a Christian event, and I remember being on stage doing sound check, and I had recently met her father before because he picked me up and brought me to rehearsal. And when he walked through the curtains to the stage, I saw her sister, which I knew, and then I saw her. And immediately I felt like I knew who she was. And there was just this feeling inside of me that I've never felt before, and decided to shoot my shot. But it wasn't directly to her. I went through her sister. And I thought she couldn't hear everything I was saying and asking, but she did. So we had mutual feelings because she felt that as well. And at the time we weren't looking. My main focus was music.
Yeah.
I was coming right out of high school, and I had a different plan. I had a different vision for my life, and she did as well. And we've been together for 8 years and married 1.
Wow, that's awesome. I love how God puts people together, man.
It's crazy.
Yeah, one of the things that I really encourage is, marriage. Marriage, it is an incredible life journey. And, to me, marriage and the family are the foundation of a strong society. And to watch you go through that journey now, man, I'm so happy for you. What is, as a newlywed, 1 year in, what's the advice you would give to newlyweds?
I think the most important thing is communication. Communicate. As human, sometimes we fail in communication, and because you fail in communication, it brings frustration, because you both are dealing with two things that might be totally different, and if you don't communicate about those two things, you both are going to clash. Yeah. And I think what has got us through the 1 year is communication, trust, love, unity. Yeah. I think unity is very important. There are couples who've been together 15, 16 years, and there's no unity. Yeah. Yeah. And, respect. I respect her. She respects me. And most importantly, what has worked for me is putting Christ in the middle of our relationship. We all need help. Yeah. We're imperfect, and we need a foundation, a strong foundation, and He's been that foundation for us.
That's cool. I feel the same way, man. That's cool. Hey, Lito, I'm gonna switch gears on you, man. How do you balance your Puerto Rican ethnicity with American culture? How do you balance that?
Okay, that's a good question. I try my best to respect everyone's culture. I am American. I was born here. Yeah. I think it's important for me to not let die the Puerto Rican culture, but also not make myself present in the American culture. And I think because I respect both cultures and I take both of them serious, I'm able to do both. I'm able to do both. I'm able to walk into places and respect everyone else around me and make sure that, I am American, but I am also Puerto Rican. And I think music connects me. Music connects me because I don't just play Latin music. Yeah. I don't just play Puerto Rican music. I try to play and try to surround myself by musicians who play jazz, funk, pop, R&B. And when you're able to surround yourself by tons of musicians from different cultures, you realize that, okay, we all have something from each other. Yep. And that's how I think I balance it. I think music has helped me balance that so much, because I don't walk with the pride of I'm Puerto Rican and that's what it's about, and and I give myself space and the opportunity to be able to surround myself by others.
How do you? I'm going to push a little bit. Look, we're both American. We're deeply, deeply Puerto Rican. We know our culture, our music very well. How I see in my family, beyond young Hispanic kids who don't really have an appreciation or understanding of the importance of our American values, American culture, right? How do we educate them? How do we help others embrace the importance of American values? How do you do that? What suggestions would you have?
So, number one, you're born here. You live here. This is where you're from. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to know where you're from and respect where you're from. Understand that if you're going to live here, you're going to be surrounded by Americans for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you understand both cultures and you don't just stick to one, number one, you give yourself the space to be surrounded by other people and gain the respect of other people. Mm. If I'm just closed into my Puerto Rican culture, then I set myself up for failure. And I think that when you understand your American culture, you open doors for yourself as well. You know, and you don't limit yourself, you don't close yourself. And I think that children, I think this starts at home, man. I think it starts at home. Back to my grandmother, she just retired, 35 years working for the Coast Guard.
Wow.
First job here, straight from Puerto Rico, here. She needed a job. She started working there. And she taught me that. The values of being an American, but not forget your culture. Yeah. And she's a great example. She learned how to speak English when she didn't know how to speak English. Wow. She would write, she would do payroll for all the Coast Guard. And, you know, as we went to her, when she retired, they did a ceremony for her. And the first thing that they said, I remember they were shouting her out and they were saying that they remember this young lady, Puerto Rican lady, didn't know too much English, but she was always available. She was always available for the opportunity, always available and ready for when someone was to offer her a position. She didn't have the mindset of, I'm just going to sit here and make money. She always made herself available. She made herself available to learn from others. Yeah. And I think that it's important today, the generation that's growing up, to know that yes, you can be Puerto Rican, you can be Dominican, you can be Cuban, African, but if you live here, make yourself available. Yeah. Make yourself available for the opportunity. You just never know. Yeah. That could be one opportunity that would change your life forever. Yeah. If you're too closed-minded, you might miss that.
Yeah, I love the response, and I also love how your grandmother was prepared, right? She prepared herself in her mindset to say, I have to work here, and I have to adapt, and I have to figure out how to, you know, become valuable. That's awesome. That's awesome. So a couple of things before we start wrapping. The first question I like to ask people is, what role has faith played in your life?
Okay, so, you know, I grew up in a home where Christ was always mentioned, Jesus was mentioned, the Christian faith was always mentioned. My grandmother, again, she is a believer, but I also had part of my upbringing where that disappeared. Yeah, and 9 years ago, I decided and I made the choice to change my life, give my life to Christ, live a life full of faith. And faith for me has been my drive every single day. The world could be falling, but if I have faith, it's going to get me through. Yeah. And faith, I think faith could be hard. Because you might not, at the moment you don't see what you want. Or at the moment you don't see what you need. But that faith will drive you to believe that that's going to happen. Yeah. And faith has been my drive, man. Faith for me has been everything. I've gone through very difficult times in my life. And because of faith, I've been able to look at the bigger picture.
And it sounds like it helped to connect you with Ruby.
Yeah, it was. It was that light that connected us both.
That's cool. All right, last one, and maybe the hardest question. What is your purpose?
You know, my purpose, I've always found myself in situations or in positions in life where I've been that person to connect or unite people when they're breaking. And I think that my purpose is to bring joy, bring hope, bring happiness, and more than anything, love to people. I've always found myself in that, whether it's music, whether it's at my job. I also worked 5 years in childcare. And I realized that more there than anything else, because I was the middleman in between parents and their children.
Wow.
And for some reason, the experiences that they would have with the time that we were together, that would help them, that would bring them to a higher level in their studies, or more than anything, emotional support. You know, a lot of the kids I worked with were broken. They came from broken homes, so they received the love from me and attention from me that maybe at home they weren't receiving. So I've always found myself around that, just that same atmosphere of just trying to bring love, hope, and joy to people. So I believe that's my purpose. I think it's beyond music. I think music is a tool to bring people to that. But love, hope, and joy.
I love it. I love it. Any final thoughts before we break?
I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, man. Well, look, everyone, thanks for listening today. Thanks for watching us. Another episode of Grip Machine DNA podcast. Share with your friends. And I want to thank Miguel Martinez for being with us today. We'll also include some clips of Miguel playing music. He is a beast. Everybody enjoy. God bless. Thanks, everyone.
Si vives día a día en un abismo de dolor y buscas solución a tus problemas, busca del Señor y sigue su camino y pronto nacerá la paz en tu corazón. Y con la paz del Señor yo he vencido mi temor y yo vivo victorioso por su amor. Y con la paz del Señor yo he vencido mi temor y yo vivo victorioso por su amor. Si vives día a día en un abismo de dolor y buscas solución a tus problemas, busca del Señor y sigue su camino.